both Pete and I are very excited to be sharing the results today. So if you, Eva, would you mind just moving to the next slide for us? So today we're going to be talking about the global payroll survey results. So Pete and I will be sharing our insight to what we're seeing, and we'll also be sharing the results from the survey from every individual that provided us some feedback. So thank you. And then we're going to talk about looking at the global payroll models, what's going to be able to be used now in your organization and move forward. And then the next item that we'll be sharing some insight is the technology. So what's going on with the technology in the global payroll space? What does our future look like? And then we're going to actually then open it up for questions. So both Pete and I would love for you to ask us some questions. So please feel free to put your questions in on the question panel, and Aoife will be kind enough to ask the questions when we get to the question period. So Aoife, I think you can move to the next slide. So Pete, do you want to take this first question, and then you can provide your insight and what you thought when we got the survey results, and then I'll share my feedback too.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously you're seeing here that 65% of firms, said they need or want to manage payroll on a single platform. And I would say, yeah, that's an absolutely not a big surprise there. It really is what we would consider a core or key element to the next gen payroll solution that we talk about in our research. Really that single centralized database that gives you the single view and harmonized view for your payrolls globally. What we're seeing vendors do and produce and invest in are really to bring online a very dynamic cloud-based payroll control centers, if you will, dashboards that enable a very real-time, globally harmonized, data set and viewpoint user experience, if you will, for the payroll operations. And as a result of that, what's happening is that your buyer community, right, the users and practitioners are now able to consolidate. Really, I've had a lot of conversations with buyers over the last several years, really talking about replacing 10, 20, even 40 plus vendors, which is crazy to think that's kind of the old way of having a different provider in every region or every country. And they're getting to this centralized viewpoint, right? A very real-time single experience globally where they have a complete control center over their full operations of payroll. And it's very impactful, I think, for the practitioners. And while I would say that the cloud software is obviously the core of that, it's what's fueling a lot of that, or totally fueling that, but also creating a lot of agility for businesses. It's certainly being enabled. It's enabling that user experience, like I talked about. But what is such a critical piece to that are the bidirectional integrations, or the APIs, as we like to talk about, which move the payroll data and bring all of those pieces and parts across not just payroll, but really your HR landscape. And bring it towards that control center in a real-time fashion so that you can enable that constant view of what's going on in dashboard for payroll. So I would say this is, I was surprised you didn't actually have a higher number here, but I would say it's absolutely critical to a modern, getting to that modern future-proof payroll environment and operations eventually that most firms, if not all, are really working towards. So yeah, a very critical piece, and I think it's the foundation, if you will, for what will be a transformed, very future-proof payroll model.
Well, Pete, it was interesting to see the results for 65% were looking at a single platform. In the past, companies were looking at a single vendor, and we've gone through that transformation where the single vendor didn't quite meet all the needs depending on the country complexity that you have in your organization or compensation packages. And I think today we're seeing with some of the vendors that there has the ability just to get a platform to manage it, a technology platform, and then you can work with whoever is going to be supporting you in that particular payroll organization. And it may be you have 20 different providers that you're working with, but because you're bringing them in, as you mentioned, through API transactions, the ability to bring in the HCM integrations that come in, and then bringing the different, using robotics and some of those functions that we have today, they all feed into a nice platform, a technology platform where we're focusing on the exchange of data through technology instead of that exchange through payslips or manual work. And then it what I look at it too is it's a single platform to have secure data privacy. So you actually know who's exchanging that information, when and how, and then going into the ability to know who's made that change because you have a good platform that's given you all the tools to be able to manage the function, which has not been available. You know, when I started my kind of career path in global payroll, it was very manual, and the single focus was just looking at somebody that could take the whole package. So we've gone over that transformation over the last 10 years, and now we're looking at how technology and the tools that we have out there can move us forward to where we are now, but then into 2022 and beyond.
Yeah, that is a great point, and I think what I should probably clarify too is just the flexibility of what these solutions obviously provide. I mean, certainly a best case scenario would be to get down to a few vendors, but you're absolutely right, and that doesn't always fit every organization. And being able to have that sort of again, flexibility to plug and play the pieces that make the most sense for them in those regions. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You can't really do that if you don't have that good integration and a central point to bring it all together. So yeah, absolutely. The aggregator model does create a tremendous amount of flexibility for organizations to be able to kind of customize, if you will, the environment that fits their compliance needs and their business needs. But yeah, you really need that central platform to bring it all together. So that the practitioners aren't sort of dealing with so many different solutions and pieces, and they can have that reliable data set and centralized control point. So yeah, absolutely, I agree with you.
Well, and I like the fact with a single platform, if you're the global owner of, let's say you have 50 countries your organization's responsible for, you have one platform to get visibility of what's happening. And especially with this last 20 plus months with COVID, there were some regions and areas that were impacted more than others, but you could maybe possibly move people from one region to help another just based on having the platform and understanding what the process was. So it does give a great piece, I think, for business continuity, which often sometimes we haven't thought a lot about it. I know we think about it in other systems, but in the payroll space, I think sometimes the thought was we'll just pay the person the same amount as we paid the previous month, and we'll somehow figure it out. But it sometimes doesn't work that way. So it does give us some more flexibility. So Eve,
Yeah,
I think we're ready. I think we're
absolutely.
ready for the next question. But yeah, you're right. You're right, Pete. It does open us up in that space of where we are.
Yeah.
So I'll start with this one. It says 40% of the people that actually looked that said automation would be the most positive impact when they asked the list of items. When I looked at the list of items, when we look at automation, I think some of them also, to me, automation is having reporting. So the 6.7 down there could have increased it more. And then, of course, with automation, it sometimes brings in the standardization. So yes, I do definitely think that automation of the processes, using the digitization of processes, having the visibility of what's happening, and the exchange of the information using the technology from HCMs or pension systems or benefit systems, and then having the ability for that automation to bring the results back. So not only can the payroll professionals check and make sure that they are comfortable with what's happening in their organization, but you have insight to be able to share that with the other groups in your organization. And I think it helps payroll to be viewed as a strategic partner. And
Yes.
we definitely found out that we are essential to our organization, and we need to continue to push that through to our organizations, because we have so much information to share that really does help make a decision on what your organization is moving forward with. So
Yeah.
Pete, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, agreed. And I love that manual entry, being replaced is at the top. That's really where payroll should be thinking, right? I mean, look, digital capabilities, specifically things like RPA automation, AI, ML, they're all having a profound impact and are going to drive some game-changing results, for what has traditionally been a very historically manual process. I would add to that too that if we're talking digital mobile, right, mobile access is also having a huge impact for the practitioner role, and really offloading that payroll impacting data maintenance to the user and really empowering them to take more control over their data, their careers, and letting payroll focus on the value-added tasks and analysis that they need to be doing. Your AI and your ML, machine learning are really there to augment users, but also the practitioner as well. Getting them to the right answer every time, the first time and always, and letting them focus on, letting payroll return focus to those exceptions, versus that sort of traditional ticking and tying, and allowing them more time to conduct analysis, work on those project improvement initiatives that they need to, and really support the key projects and fundamentally return more value back to their business as a strategic advisor and partner. And it really is, I think, a game changer for the practitioner role. And you're right. I love what you said in the beginning. It is going to elevate payroll to that next level, get them out of that, like I said, just manual effort, and let them return focus to more analytic, more value-added processes and activities that are gonna help the business in the long run. So yeah, I think this is the type of stuff that is really going to move payroll to the next level and take it away from its simple processor role, and create more of a trusted advisor for the business that they should have been always using in the past, just given the data that payroll sits on, and the criticality of the information that they can bring to the table when it comes to compliance, when the business is making decisions about, hey, where should we put new employees, or where should we enter a space, or we've got this strategic initiative to acquire or merge. And really, now you're seeing so much of the work from home becoming the norm. The work from anywhere is really becoming a competitive tool, if you will, for employers to compete for talent. And so that is making the complexity for payroll really to where compliance is and the changes, right? They're coming faster and faster from the entities globally. And that's complicated when you're managing 40 countries, or you're managing whatever number that your footprint is. Having help to be focusing you on the things that you should be doing versus all that manual stuff that just the system can do, right? A digital solution can help you with, is really just going to transform the role. And I love the fact that payroll is becoming seen as more of a strategic partner and less of just a simple processor anymore.
Yeah, it's been an area that definitely should have been recognized for the efforts, but I definitely think the automation's there. And Pete, you talked about work anywhere situations where we're going to have, I think we have to face the reality that our employees are going to be all over the world. We have a demand for employees right now, but how can we get that information? Because we all know that each tax agency wants a piece of that pie. And
Yeah.
what is that going to look like? I see, and with payroll professionals, I talk about we've gone through this transition of COVID, and now we're going into 2022, where there's, we're going to figure out where people are working and set up new programs to be agile. But I think my view, and when I've talked to other payroll professionals, we're looking at 2023 to be our tax year, or where the tax compliance and the agencies will all ask, and we'll have some more reporting. So we need the automation and the tools.
Yeah.
I also think the automation for the employee is important, like being able to see your pay on your phone, and the tools are there too to even explain, why did you get more this pay period versus the previous pay period? Did you get your pay increase, or you met a cap on one of the social taxes? So they don't even have to ask payroll, or they don't even have to view it themselves. They can get the immediate answer. And really that's kind of key for them to be successful too, because we're living in this automated world of we want the answer immediately. And how are we supporting that for our employees?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I would just add to that you're absolutely right. I think what I love about that mobile empowerment, if you will, that is, or the mobile capability that's empowering employees, is really important in the employee experience too, right? Not only does it give them the ability to manage their information, their data, and to your point, the on-demand is critical, right? Everything in our personal lives is on demand. The expectation is now in the workplace, and it should be not just exclusive to HR and talent. It should be also, specifically for payroll. And that is very, very important in the employee experience, because when you can put that power in the employee's hands and they can trust the reliable results, right? The accuracy, the timeliness, the compliance of their data. When you give them that, I think you're just boosting the trust, right? And you're really creating a greater transparency into payroll results, right? Not just, you're right, it does lift off work for payroll, that day to day, again, back to them doing more value added things. But really it makes employees much more confident in what the employer is doing with their money. It creates more financial wellness, health, because they understand where their money is going and how it's impacting their, their broader lives, taxes, and other things. But that is so important today, right? I mean, we talk a lot about HR transformation, and we talk a lot about talent management, and we talk a lot about cloud HR and all these things that firms should be doing to be more competitive. But I think it all really hinges on payroll, right? You can have all of those best things in place and all the best investments, and you can have the best intentions, but if you don't get the payroll correct, and there's not a trust for the data, and there's not a reliability to what's coming out, and a transparency. I mean, really, transparency is the key here. That's going to be eroding to the trust, and it's going to erode the employee experience. And ultimately, you're going to that all those other bets are going to fall apart. So, really giving employees the empowerment to own their information does absolutely help payroll, but it really does lend itself to a more enriching employee experience, a much more trusting experience. And at the end of the day, I think that's what is so beautiful about payroll. It's finally getting the recognition as a critical element in the employee experience, and really with a vehicle for bringing together all of those things that we talked about, a little while ago, about transformation and talent management and all of that. Just one other thing I would add here, I would have liked to have seen consolidated multi-country reporting a little bit higher. I think that firms need to really recognize that the power of the data that they have in payroll is largely been untapped historically, right? A lot of firms don't understand the information that they have. They probably don't trust it because it's not reliable. It's being cobbled together. Often, when you have that disparate, systems, and you have multiple vendors, it's hard to get all that together if you don't have a high quality integration and a modern platform, a single system to control center that, right? A dashboard for all of that. And if you don't have that reliable real-time data, no one's really going to trust that. And so then, you're really almost underutilizing a very rich data set that can be very beneficial in that strategic pivot for payroll. And I think that's one area that I would love to see, buyers and practitioners saying, hey, we need very reliable reporting, and here's what it can return back to the business, right? It can be a very value-added tool. And like I said, I think payroll sits on very rich data that often just doesn't get tapped, and it's probably not altogether trusted because they can't access it because they lack the environment to actually enable all of that. So, very important stuff right now, all working together in harmony.
Well, Pete, I think that's a very important item, because often if you talk out in the payroll community, they say they need to do reporting, and sometimes we hear it takes them 2 or 3 days to consolidate either different payroll reports, or they're pulling it from 4 or 5 different systems. And before you know it, when a senior person asks the question, they're not going to wait 3 days. They expect it to be instantaneous. And that is one of the keys that, as we look at automation and the platform, as you're kind of planning, if you're going to go in to make a change in your global footprint and your model, do you have those capabilities today? So kind of doing that dashboard check of really where you are today in your space, what do you have and don't have? And a lot of times, like going to conferences, it gives you the ability to see what other products are out there, right? It's kind of doing your due diligence to see what's being offered, and how do I what's my scorecard with my particular company? Can I provide the information that's needed? And I will say the reporting is key, because as you mentioned earlier, Pete, about where you put employees, right? If you're going to do an acquisition, you're out doing an acquisition, and the senior people don't know how much it costs for employer cost in France. They're going to have a big surprise once that acquisition closes up, and they see that they're paying 40% or so in employer costs that they did not have before. So looking at that as we move forward.
Yeah, that's a good point. And there's 2 things I would just add to that. The on-demand, right? The on-demand expectation is there for your employees, and it should be, your leadership is going to have that exact on-demand, expectation, especially if they're getting it from HR and they can't get it from payroll. It just doesn't make sense, right? And so they need that data, and it needs to be reliable to make those business case decisions and be able to drive that. And I think, there's probably a buzzword that came out of COVID that you hear a lot, right? After the pandemic kind of eased a little bit and things were a reality, and we realized we weren't going back to normal, and that was the word agility. And that data creates a lot of agility, and the on-demand reliability of real-time data that you can trust, that is globally consolidated and shows you a viewpoint of your whole organization. is so very vital, right? I mean, you can't create that agility without that data. And so that's something that I think that organizations need to look at. That's the value in this, right? Is the agility that it will ultimately provide the business, is having reliable access to payroll data, which is, we talk about data a lot as analysts, right? Being the new oil, right? You see all of the major companies that are the top of the Dow, or the most profitable, they're the data companies, right? Your Googles, your Facebook, your big tech. It's not your gas firms anymore. And so there's a reason for that, and it's because there's power in that data. And the same thing can be true for your HR and your payroll organization, and ultimately your business. When those pieces and parts are in place, those modern technologies are in place to enable you with that data on demand, real time, reliable, accurate, and coming from a single source, right? That a trusted source, a single trusted source globally, where you can make a decision and go, yeah, I know I'm doing the right thing because the data tells me this or that, and I can rely on it because it is flowing from all of my systems, and I can see it globally, and I can get it at a moment's notice, right? And even now, you go back to this, to our conversation a little bit earlier about AI and machine learning. Augmented analytics are coming about, right, over on the HR side, and it's spilling into payroll, where executives and leaders and users and practitioners are able to use AI and ML to surface things that they might not be seeing, or may not have even seen previously to their data, giving them those insights to say, look, are you aware of this? And here's what you ought to really be doing about that. So that's the exciting stuff. And I think at the end of the day, the net for the business is greater agility, is what you're going to get out of that payroll data that you can trust and you can access when and where you need it.
No, I'm going to agree with you, and it gives them the tools themselves to have the data to then to do, even if it's simple as figuring out what the exchange rate is in XYZ, or your future planning for 1 to 2, 3 years. What does that really look like?
Yeah.
And if you don't have the reporting to get that, and don't have the automation that all the tools are pulled together, you're going to be behind, right? You're not going to be the front runner. And in the employee experience world, they want to work for the leading companies, right? They want to see somebody that has automation, looking at the experience. What does that look like? So it's important to attract talent, but it's also important for payroll to share what they have and continue to look at ways to help the business. Because I think at the end of the day, we're in payroll, we were hired to support the business, and how can we help other than just paying the employees is one piece of it, but how can we help the operations or the different teams with the information we have and the cost, so that they can plan out what they need. And maybe it's as simple as getting overtime costs so they can make a decision. Do they hire 2 or 3 additional people in their organizations, because the overtime really drives what that would look like.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. 100% agree.
So Aoife, let's go on to the next question.
Okay, perfect. Oh yeah, there we go.
Okay, so Pete, do you want to take this question?
Yeah, this is interesting, and this is something that I think a lot of maybe folks looking at their solutions might be not necessarily really focusing as much as they need to, right? Look, the cloud and all of the great user experiences and mobile, all those things are fantastic. But what really brings all of that together, and it's so important for global payroll, is around integration. I wasn't surprised by this. We saw 40% of buyers in our research this year. We did our biggest payroll study that we've done historically. I think it was our 13th one, if I'm not mistaken. And 40% of buyers told us that they still have work to do when it comes to integrating their HR landscape with payroll, or integrating their global payroll. And about half of those said that they had plans to continue more integrations, in the very near term. We really need to be thinking about these dynamic integrations, these bi-directional APIs, as the arteries to payroll, right? It's a critical piece that really brings it all together. It pulls all this tech together and allows that single source of truth. It allows the free flow of data bidirectionally from your key systems, particularly your core HR, but more importantly, your time systems, your ancillary stuff that HR needs to operate. And it brings it all together really in real time. And that's where the on-demand can be brought about, right? Without your modern integrations, you're going to have a degraded data flow. Manual effort is then going to be required to bring that stuff together, bring that reporting together for your leadership. It's going to make your compliance to some extent more manual, or maybe even fully. and it leaves the data potentially unreliable. It's not real time. And when you don't have a good quality integration, right, between payroll and core HR, or any of your other systems in the landscape, your employees are going to feel that, right? So that employee experience, the user experience, I should say, really is going to be, it's just not going to be possible, right? And the employee shouldn't know that there are different systems at play, right? When they need to do something in the system, it should just do what they need it to do. It should get them to the right answer, right? We talked about AI and ML helping with that. They shouldn't have to be experts, and it shouldn't feel choppy and disparate. So, it really is important that we understand that any solution that you're looking at needs to be very tightly integrated. We say seamless integration. And what we mean by that is it shouldn't seem like two different pieces. It should all come together in a centralized way, and really drive a good quality user experience, certainly on the front end, but it should allow that bidirectional movement of data. It should allow that real-time on-demand access, and really bring all those results together in a consolidated way that you can act upon and make some real decisions for. So yeah, there's a lot of work still to be done for a lot of firms, and I think you can see that here that they need to they need to be looking at that. And I think it's interesting because a lot of firms will set off on deploying a cloud system and then start to look at payroll within about a year of that. And I think it's very, very critical that you look at the platform in terms of all of the things that we've talked about, but you need to really press hard on those integrations, and they need to work. They need to flow that data, and you need to be able to make sure that it is going to support you in that way. And so, very critical piece that I think there's still a lot of work to be done on both sides. And I just love seeing that people are thinking about it. So that's great.
Well, the thing that I thought was interesting on this question, if I take the last two answers about they don't have an HCM or it's weak or non-existent, that's almost 40%. So as you mentioned, Pete, it does have a lot of work to go, but it is so extremely powerful if you use the HCM to the max. And so a lot of times I find someone's implemented something and they've done a great job in the US, but they didn't do global, right? So they left global out. And so you've lost that powerful tool that you spent a good sizable amount of money on, and you're not using it to the max. So using those abilities, what are those items that should be in the HCM that are outside the system? Can they be integrated in with the integration piece? And how you can make sure that you've got everything so you have a good system of record. So you have one system of record and you have good controls over that. If we look at data privacy and all the security, fraud, and all those items that we have to, in today's world, we have to think about and look at. So I think it's really very important to take a look at what is your HCM today? Can it do more than you're doing today? And does that involve reaching out to HR or IT to kind of build a plan or a project that you can get more out of it, because it's going to save you long term. And I'm also seeing some of our clients are taking their HCM, bring it in, getting the payroll results. They get their pay information, but they're bringing that pay slip that's in that local country back into their HCM. So when we talk about that employee experience, they go one place, me or my pay, and that my pay, when they click into that HCM, is really their pay slip from that. It could be from France, it could be from India, and they're able to see that. So that employee experience, when you go through orientation or you talk about something, or there's even a portal with information, all they need to do is click there. I'm also seeing that with some tax forms and lever forms, so that everybody has that experience, and it kind of helps to build that no matter where you are in the world, we think about you as being important, and you can go out and get your pay information. And I say 24/7, so you don't even have to go out to a portal or anything. It's right there for you. So I think we're going to see a lot with HCMs coming forward.
Oh yeah, there's still a number of firms, you'd be surprised, very big firms who still have a need to address core HR, right? Even beyond payroll, right? They need to figure out what they're going to do with their core HR, and some are still riding out past investments, which I don't think is going to be sustainable forever, just because of some of the support models. But one of the other things I would just sort of emphasize and add on here, and it isn't exclusive to payroll necessarily, is just that any modern solution that you're going to invest in, it needs to be, and it should be, and they are being built with full extensibility, right? Deep extensibility, microservices architecture. And what that really means is it creates the connectability, if you will, the integration, the APIs to bring solutions together. And I always kind of liken it back to my days as a solution architect in the outsourcing world, where every time we went to a major big company, right, typically your bigger ones, the ones that had kind of grown from acquisitions or just large organizations, they would always have these databases, right? Typically your Microsoft Access type databases, and there was one guy who would, or lady who would manage these things for the organization. And if they got hit by a train, we couldn't pay our tips, or we couldn't worry about some obscure deduction we need to run our business from payroll. And that is really going away because of extensibility and because of these integrations. And the reason is that look, your HR platform is not going to build everything for everyone, right? They're going to build most of what most firms need, but there are going to be those unique things that that organizations have in their business or in their industry or whatever that they need to address, and that's where these integrations can really help and bring in point solutions, if you will, within the ecosystem, right? You hear a lot of that from your bigger HCM platforms. They're building these integration ecosystems to really fill white spaces and address these unique needs and solutions to kind of create I'll use the word custom, but a custom environment, a very flexible environment for that business to build the solution that meets their needs. And I think that that's the beauty of cloud and the extensibility of cloud, is that it is allowing firms to really step back and look at it and say, hey, I don't have to go, there is not a need to go to any one size fits all, right? The flexibility that's out there in aggregator models and in all the different technologies that you can use can be connected together through these integrations and really bring it all together and have it flow and work well, so that you have a very custom or flexible approach to your solution that meets your specific needs, but fundamentally can be trusted to move that data back and forth from system to system, and wherever it needs to go, so that you can derive, as we've talked, the reliable on-demand information. So platform extensibility is really key to your decision making when you're looking at a platform. Does it have the ability to connect to the things that you need? And will it provide that data flow? And that's something that I think that is super critical.
It goes back to our very first question about having a global payroll platform. Yeah. So you're not, as you mentioned, not everything's going to come in on the HCM, but where can you pull that other information? So when you have your global payroll platform, you have all information that's related to payroll that you need to be able to do the calculations and the reporting and compliance piece. It's all in one place, but you can get it from multiple sources by using the integration and the automation that we have today and BI. So those are all things that we're going to see, and it really enhances the existence that we have today. And I see in some aspects it helps us with the challenges that we have country over country, because they're all going to be different, which is fine. We just have to accept that. And how do we get that information in? Because at the end of the day, payroll people want to pay people correctly and then be 100% compliant. So really, we all know that, and making sure that experience is wonderful.
Yeah.
So Eva, let's move on. Let's move on to the next question. Well, really, we don't really have a question, but we're on this slide, we're really talking about things for you to think about in your current model. So is your current model going to sustain you now and then into 2022 and into 2023? We all know changes are happening, and what are the demands in your particular organization? Are you using a BPO, an aggregator model, looking at those pieces? Do you have the right growth platform set up for the growth of what's going to happen? Kind of, are you also ready for having remote workers work anywhere, being agile, as Pete mentioned? And then how about managing it with multiple vendors? Do you have enough information in your payroll model to be able to set up SLAs, measure the performance, making sure that you're getting the value up from the vendor? And then I would also look at this as another about the reporting. So Pete, do you have anything that you might add or suggestion that we should think about when we look at doing that? I would say a health check on where we are today, as long as the year's ending, and then going into 2022. What things would we want on our wish list as we move into 2022?
Yeah, I think when you look at a sustainable payroll model, the other thing you might want to just call out here would be just the scalability of it, right? Its ability to cover where you're functioning and where you're headed, right? And I think that
Mhm.
probably, is it right? That's probably the third bullet. Is it right for a high growth company, right? And is the platform and is the provider investing in that and bringing about, it's great if it meets your needs today, but is it going to meet your needs in the future, right? Are they continuing to proliferate and invest and bring about more of these modern digital capabilities? So, really don't just think about a snapshot of right now, right? Because if you're a high growth organization, you're clearly not going to be the same company today that you will be in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Does that solution align to that path? And I think that's where I would be, pushing on as well, right? Is it scalable? Is it being invested in? Is it going to grow with me as we go along? And I think all these things we've talked about today create a lot of that flexibility, and that's the type of vendor that I think you want to be looking at. The platform too that you want to be looking at is do they provide you these next gen capabilities, and are they progressing towards wherever you're sort of heading and what you're looking to do? So that would be my other sort of advice.
I would agree, because we have different type of workers that we have today. We have some workers that are just working on assignments, or we have employee of record employees, we have shadow employees that we need to report. So we have many pieces that can make it complex, but does our payroll model, our platform support all of those different types of things that are going to happen? Because it's not going to be standard. We're in a new era with many things happening.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
if I'll let you go on to the next slide. So Pete, do you want to take this one? The technology and the future of our payroll. What is it going to look like? Or what are your highlights on this?
Yeah, well, we've hit on a lot of these things today, right? I mean, payroll technology for growth, right? I just sort of talked about this a little bit, right? You need to make sure that your solutions are going to meet your needs long term. Harmonizing payroll operations to a single experience to the front end user, but also to the back end, practitioner, right? It needs to be centralized. Again, we talked about a single platform. It's so critical to bringing it all together and harmonizing everything so that you can have that single source of truth. Single experience, single cadence, if you will, for your payroll. So very, very, very important. Data first standardization. I would even say data first or data driven model, right? You want a data driven organization. Everyone should be thinking that when they're buying solutions or investing. How do we become an insights driven organization, right? You should be leveraging this rich data that your organization has in payroll. And if you can't trust it and you can't access it and you can't really count on it, you can't do that, right? So data first is a great point. Automation and integrations, we really hammered this home, I hope. Really understand the integration model and how your platform is going to work with your other platforms. It doesn't really amount to anything if you have the best technology, but it's not connected well. And connected is even an understatement. I would say deeply integrated, right? Deeply integrated to where it feels seamless to you and the users is very, very critical. And I think there was a time, and I'm sure it happens across every line of work, right? There's a fear of automation, right? Is it going to replace my job? Is it going to change what I do? Yes, it will change what you do, but it's not going to replace the practitioner, because I believe that the practitioner is very, very important, right? Emotional intelligence will never, a computer will never have that, right? And you need that analytic, emotional sort of intelligence to make good decisions about the data and about the information that's at hand. But I think embracing that augmentation or that automation to provide an augmentation, if you will, to the user is where payroll really ought to look at this and say, hey, this is a tool that can facilitate my organization going from being just a simple cost center to being a very strategic advisor on a different level, and maybe even sitting at the table as HR is making some of these decisions, helping the business make decisions is going to be really key. And automation and digitalization is really going to help lend to that. Certainly your reporting. We go back to the data first. You can't do that if you don't have reliable data and you don't have access to real-time reports. All of that is going to help drive better decision making, give more capability to your leadership, and again deliver hopefully the agility that you really need in order to operate in this very volatile world. COVID is not the last COVID that we're going to have. It might not be COVID next time. It may be something else. or your business may, you've got to be nimble and fast now in this world, right? And in the global economy, both to acquire talent, but also to grow your business. And I think that, that reporting, having reliable data is going to be very, very essential as we've really hammered home, I hope, in being able to enable that. So yeah, and certainly, again, back to my point about flexibility, being able to choose the vendors that make sense for your business, whether that's, a handful or a number of them, it's going to depend on what your organization needs best for them, and the ability to have a solution that can bring that all together to a central data point, a central control center, as I like to call it, and scale with you as you grow, is going to be so very important. And again, I just think that what really, is going to change payroll, the practitioner role, and the future of what the payroll organization means to the company is going to all be predicated on the next generation solutions that they put into place, and how well they embrace them and change with them, and enable them to do what they can do to help payroll alleviate all that nonsensical manual work. I can think back to when I was a payroll manager at a Fortune 50 company. It took us a week to run payroll, right, for 90,000 people. Now firms on these new systems are doing it in hours, right? And they're doing it highly reliable, less manual work, considerably less manual work. And it really is putting the practitioner in a much different position, and taking that rich talent that sits in payroll and using their expertise to be more value added, right? Be more value added in supporting projects, all the things we've already kind of talked about, supporting HR, and ultimately really giving the business a team of people that can help them in making these decisions and make them right, compliance wise and employee experience wise, and and just fundamentally fundamentally putting back more to giving back more to the business than they were in the past. So I'm really excited for what it means for payroll. I really do get amped up about it because I've lived it. I've got the scars, and I know what it's like. And so I think the more you can embrace this, the future looks bright for payroll, fundamentally now.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up about the automation and the fear of your job and doing something different. The world's changing every day, so we need to embrace that automation, how we can better get that information, how we move forward with that. I know we've gone over a lot of items, and depending on where you are in that transformation journey, you may not be there yet, but I just challenge you to think about it. Where do you want to be for this next year? Who do you need to work with? Is it HR? Is it your IT teams? Talking to your manager and sharing what's out there and how you can move your organization forward. These transformations are where leading companies don't happen overnight. They've made the decision to get a good, solid global platform, decided and looked at their processes, how they're going to go through standardization, and a lot of it really is thinking about the employee and then your stakeholder engagement as we move forward. So those are kind of key to be successful.
That's a great point. I love that you mentioned that about the transformation journey. Listen, firms, just like kind of like personal progress when you're maybe at the gym or other goals that you have in your personal life, we're not all starting on the same base, right? Not every firm is starting their transformation on first base. They've got other work to do, right? And so, yes, I think understanding that you don't have to bite it all off overnight. You don't have to compare yourself. You should benchmark yourself against your peers in your industry and things. That's absolutely smart. That's an insight-driven move. But don't feel you have to keep pace with someone else, right? You really want to look at what is best for us, right? We as analysts get asked all the time, what's the best system, fill in the blank, HR, payroll, talent. And I always say, if anyone answers that question, it's probably wrong. You really need to look at what is best for you and move at the pace that is best for you. And the beauty of all of these great new technologies that are coming online and integrations is you can put together the solution that makes sense, and you can really address your specific needs and move at the pace that you need to move. But you do need to move, right? You can't expect that you're going to transform by buying a piece of technology and putting it in. That's not enough. You have to take on the diet, if you will, right? You have to change with it. And so because we see that a lot in our research where, well, we put in this system but we're not getting, we're not seeing the results. Well, when you unpack it, you realize, well, you didn't adopt mobile and you didn't do this and you didn't really utilize it. You just sort of bought it and you just sort of put it there, but you didn't embrace it and you didn't live with it. And so I would say that the transformation journey is not linear sometimes. Things are going to happen that you didn't expect: mergers, acquisitions, divestitures, COVID, right? Things happen that we cannot foresee, and so just know that transformation journey, can take time, but stay steady to a plan. Have a strategy. That's another issue I see a lot in global payroll. Firms will cut out on a transformation with no strategy. I mean, where are you headed? You don't know. So really take a step back and understand what you need, where you're trying to get to, what the timeline is, what the investment is, and then start working on that as and when it makes sense for your business, and bite off the pieces that you need to bite off as and when, depending upon where you are. And I think you firms will get there, but it isn't, it does take time, and it does take work, and it takes change. And I would say that's something you don't want to skimp on, is the change management. When you're really looking at the organizational impact, of course, we're getting very HR now, but the change management is a key piece that I think firms sleep on, don't have the capability for, and often need help with. And that's something that you really need to think about, especially when you're touching the employee, right? You want to make sure that the change management piece of that is there. So yeah, very, I agree with you completely.
Well, if we can move on to the next slide. So I agree with the change management. As we move on to the next slide, a lot of times the solution doesn't work because we didn't think about change management.
Yeah. Or didn't communicate it well.
Didn't communicate it well. So interesting enough that both Pete and I were at HR Tech about a month or so ago. We didn't meet each other there. We didn't know each other were there. There was people there, and listened to HR experts in the space kind of projection of what's going to happen, and really brought in some great information of really what's happening after COVID, what's happening now. And when I say now, it's really impactful of what's happening in our organization. Just things, we have a new term. We had the Great Depression many years ago, but now we have the Great Resignation. And listening at HR Tech, when we see the number of people that have left their job, like 4 million in the US left in August. That's a lot of people that have left positions. And when you get information like 2/3 of them didn't even have another job, right? So we've never seen that in our lifetime of this type of things happening. They had a clip at HR Tech about the woman in the workforce where they said they always had 2 jobs, but now they have 3 jobs, trying to teach, children on the Zoom and try to manage that, do their job, manage everything they have to do with everything that's happened. Mentally, people are just burnt out. So where are we? So I think that the big focus, and I'll have Pete kind of share his insight, the big focus I got is really the employee experience. What is that employee experience? And what are we going to do about how they work, right? How agile are we going to be? Let them have a hybrid work arrangement. It was interesting this week. I'm actually in Ireland this week, and I was talking with one of our clients yesterday at dinner, and they were explaining, they told me that about a company that decided, when everybody can go back to work, they were going to make everybody come back to the office, which, that doesn't go over real well right now. And then all of a sudden, like within, 3 or 4 weeks, they saw a lot of people resigning, and they triggered it back to the fact that they weren't going to be flexible in how people are going to work and have kind of an agile work situation. But these are all demands that we in payroll are going to be seeing as HR works with the organization to attract talent. And we're seeing it in many different areas, and I've seen it kind of now globally, and I definitely have seen it in the US. So Pete, I know that you're out talking to a lot of people too. What are you seeing in this impact of these different things that are impacting us?
Yeah, I kind of wish we would have made this a graphic of those. You ever see that person at the circus that has the plates on sticks and they got them all over their body and their plates are all spinning? I think it's funny. It is, but it's sort of what HR is doing now, right? They've got a lot of balls they're juggling and plates they're trying to keep spinning without breaking. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, right? These are just the latest trends. It's not all the standard stuff that was already hard about HR, if you will. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of things on, when you look at this, we've got 9 boxes on here. All of them are in some way payroll touches directly or indirectly some of these, or is impacted by it. So yeah, I think it's really, really, there's a lot happening. There's a lot to worry about, and some of these are even more magnified and amplified, if you will, if you're in a certain industry or you're in a certain, you know, maybe country or state even. So yeah, there's a lot to deal with. But one thing that you kind of mentioned there, and I think it was something that I won't steal credit for it. There was an HR executive, tech executive I was speaking to at HR Tech that talked about that. You know, and it's a word that you used earlier and just now, is around flexibility, right? That is going to become the more flexibility you can offer, and the greater flexibility that an employer can support, is ultimately going to be the ones that win this war for talent, right? And is going to win in the future, you know, the future of work, right? You really are going to have to be flexible as an organization and agile, right? To ebb and flow through these things. And have the tools and have the capability, and again, the data to help you make good decisions. And ultimately, that flexibility is going to trickle down to payroll. It's going to trickle out, you know, work from anywhere is a great example. It's the ultimate flexibility, right? I can go live anywhere and work wherever I want now because I'm remote. But that's great. But now a lot of employers are finding themselves as multi-country companies, and they didn't ever plan to be, right? They only, you know, thought they'd only be in one country, and now they've got employees in 3 or 4, or maybe just one, and they've got a global payroll, right? And so you've got to really be looking at all of these things through the lens of how is it going to impact payroll, and how can payroll support them? You know, getting back to payroll being a trusted advisor, you know, all of this stuff is going to have an impact directly or indirectly, and they need to be able to come to the table with the support to help the business stay flexible, stay nimble, and be able to be agile. And this is only 9, right? There's more, and there are more coming, and these are changing, and there are going to be offshoots of things that come out of this, right? So there's really a lot going on, and now I think is the time that firms really need to be stepping back, looking at their landscape through that lens, and saying, how do we not only address these challenges and prepare for the next unforeseen things, the next COVID, the next whatever, and what tools do we need to future-proof our operations? And that's what I really think, and I hope people are going to take away from this.
I think it gives us the call to action as Aoife gives us some questions that might have come in. So Aoife, I think go to the next slide. Do we have any questions for Pete and myself?
Yeah, just one moment now. I will move through the controls of this system and have a look. Bear with me one moment.
It definitely was eye-opening as you talk to other professionals at HR Tech. Really, everyone's going through the challenge of what to do, and you see it in every aspect, and even to not being able to hire employees and what the long lead time is for that. So there's a lot of impacts that are going on, and it does impact payroll, because at the end, I'm happy to have anybody work wherever they want, but I know my tax person or tax country will have some demands later on in life. That another challenge for us to focus on. But with automation and the information, it will make our life, at least we'll have the records and the information.
Yeah, and the employees will be happier, right? It's a benefit, if you will, to the employee to be able to do that. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, yeah, some excellent points discussed there. Okay, so we have a question about, I think we discussed it earlier, about on-demand pay capability. So will the on-demand pay capability trend continue, or is it just a fad, and will it pass eventually?
Yeah, you want me to go first, maybe, Mary?
Yeah, you can go first, Pete.
Yeah, you know, look, it's not a fad, and it's not going away. And look, I will be the first to admit, when I first heard about it 5 or so years ago, I recoiled a little bit, right? The payroll manager in me was like, hold on, you know, next day deposits, what about controls, what about this? Just like most practitioners should and would. But I think we have to understand that these things are the types of modern solutions employees expect, right? We talked about on-demand being critical. You know, how much do you see digital now in your payments, right? When you're out and about in your life. I was just in the JFK airport 2 nights ago, coming back from Greece, and I remember I went up to one of the quick serve food companies. I won't name them, and I pulled out a $20 bill to pay for my order. The gentleman said, we don't accept cash. And so, you know, it was like, that was the first time I'd had someone say that to me in a little while, but it's true, right? I mean, we're getting to where digital payments are the norm. You know, you go to your local stores, most, if not all of them, offer the touchless. You can use your mobile phone, your Apple Pay or your you touch your credit card now. They all do that. Fundamentally, that is the expectation, right? For the employee, for the consumer, and it's spilling into the workplace. And certainly things like on-demand pay have created a number of financial wellness results. And I would even argue on-demand pay has, and I've done some research myself, I've done some interviewing of clients that have used this and looked into the impact of what they have found as a result. And it's largely not really that payroll impacting. It is, there are great things that impacts payroll. It drives a lot of more direct deposit. But what it actually is doing is it creating talent impacts, right? Retention, recruiting, referrals, all of the things that employers are starving for and need in order to compete for talent today. And so I think that yes, it is a bit of a stopgap in getting people away from these predatory loans, especially in the US, giving employees more, as we've talked about, empowerment over their wages. They've earned it, why can't they have it? That stuff is not going away. And I think in certain industries, it's much more prevalent. Your high hourly, maybe lower wage workers really are expecting it. And I don't think it's going to go away. But more importantly, what I think is important to understand is that the modern technology now, right? The centralized database, the continuous calculation, the on-demand pay capabilities, it's really breaking down the traditional pay cycle, and it's chipping away at that and making it arbitrary, right? Why are we paying monthly? Why are we asking employees to wait 2 weeks for their pay? Why can't we give it to them as and when? And certainly there are controls in place to keep people from not abusing it or abusing it, keep people or keep the company compliant and make sure tax deposits are made on time. And fundamentally, I think it's just the way it's going, right? And you have that all of that digital sort of adoption underpinned by now. Cryptocurrencies are really hot. I don't think those are going away. And so I think digital solutions, just as a standard across our lives, is going to be the norm. On demand is going to be the norm, right? If I can Uber, if I can buy a pair of shoes, if I can book a flight out of my pocket, why can't I see my paycheck? Why can't I pull some of my funds and pay my kids' tuition? Why can't I do this, right? Why do I have to wait? And the reality of it is you have employees who will go work somewhere else because an employer can provide that. And so I think that we really need to understand that these digital capabilities are not going to leave. They are not a fad. And while they have been slower, maybe in some countries outside of the US, and faster in other areas, maybe in Asia Pac, for example, I know there's a lot of digital mandates. It's not going away. And I think you're going to see it come faster and heavier, and you really got to be ready for it.
Yeah, I agree with you, Pete. Your first response is, when I first heard it, we're going to do this, kind of what would be the work on payroll. Once you kind of got over that hurdle and thought about it, it's an advantage. It kind of helps the employee experience and moving forward. And definitely in the global space, we're seeing more and more of that. I will say 5 years ago, I was in India talking with a group of payroll professionals, and one of the people there said, well, why can't we get paid today? And then we went through a whole big discussion, and we saw both sides of the coin about, well, look at the extra work, what it's going to be. But the reality was, it is coming. So are you prepared with what's happening? And it is something that we're going to have to be asked to offer, right? And to be competitive. It's, once again, be competitive and provide services for our employees.
Back to that flexibility too. Yeah.
Yep. The flexibility of, even if they, sometimes people will say, well, why do they need their pay now when they have, they've earned enough, there shouldn't be a problem. They should be able to manage their money. That's not what the discussion's about. They want it now, and just get over that fact and move forward with it, I think is important sometimes.
It's fundamentally the expectation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually a question in, I know we're probably going over time, but someone has asked a question about on-demand pay. Will it be an issue in the UK with the way UK minimum wage legislation is written? I don't know if that.
Yeah, that might be better served for Mary, right? You're the CEO, probably more close to that. But let me just say, we are seeing take off certainly everywhere. Yeah, but I would say, yes, you have some compliance challenges that will have to be thought through. And I would say there are countries that are being much slower in adoption as a result. I think Belgium is one, and a couple of others where it might not even be culturally fitting right now, but I think you're going to still see these tools proliferate and come about. So, but I'll leave the compliance element to you, Mary.
Yeah, the compliance thing is, even though we the person's asking for the pay that's already earned. So I'm asking for my last week's pay today for what was already earned. That we still have to pay the person the minimum wage or the requirement for the job. So we still have to be compliant there. And then as Pete mentioned, some countries are a little bit slower on onboarding with that, but definitely it's not a problem. The payroll people are going to pay per the requirements, and you're not going to shortchange anybody. They've already earned the money. So basically think if I was getting 10 euros per hour, then if I got that amount and I asked for that over the next week to be delivered, all you're doing is delivering my pay early. And of course, how these actually work, and sometimes I think that's the challenge, is they're asking for the pay early, you're making the payment to them, but at the end of their pay period, there's a true up between, you know, what was owed to the tax agency and what you already got as your advance. And surprise, you're going to get a little bit less because you already got some of it early. So it's really, if you look at it through that process, and I think embracing it instead of, a lot of times, sometimes payroll people, the first thought is, wow, and some more work for me. If we embrace or think about it, we can be a change agent, and we can also support the business. So just looking at it from a different lens. And I did really have the same thought Pete had when it first came out, is like, oh, just another thing to offer. But after you start to think about it, there's so many benefits, and people want it, but there is many people around the world that need the funds early. And why are we not giving it to them if they've already earned it? And in some cases, that really impacts their family and their livelihood. So I look at it as being a very good benefit that's out there.
Yeah, remember, flexibility and empowerment, right? Those are two,
Right.
this does exactly that. It's just another tool that you have to deliver more empowerment to the employees, more support and flexibility, right? Remember that, it's key to being competitive now.
Yeah.
So we do have quite a lot of questions. So what I will do is I will ask Mary and Pete to take a bit of time offline to answer those questions and get back to the individuals personally with those answers, because we've gone a bit over time. But I want to thank you both for that excellent conversation. Some really key points there about the importance of data, how it relates into employee experience, and really good conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.